Immigration is certainly a hot issue right now and truly a divisive one. Entertainment litigator and author Peter Afrasiabi joins us in studio to discuss the case and what this decision, the U.S. Supreme Court decision, could mean for both sides here. Thanks
Absolutely.
very much. Now, we were talking about the decision. Steve Handelsman broke it down for us. There are 8 justices hearing this. It could be a split decision. What happens if, in fact, that's the case?
Absolutely, it could be split. If they split 4-4 under the Supreme Court's law, the lower court decision will stand, and that means the Ninth Circuit's decision finding the law invalid in total will stand as the law.
What's the likelihood of that, do you think?
I think that's very unlikely, having read the transcript of the oral argument today. I think, in all likelihood, it's a tough day for President Obama on some portions of Arizona's law. I think there's probably more than 4 to 5 justices who are willing to uphold some of the provisions, the search and release provisions. I think you may see more of an ideological split on some of the criminal provisions of the law.
How important an issue do you think this will be come November and during the election?
Massive issue. It's really critical and really important. This law and immigration is certainly a divisive issue. It's a major political issue. President Obama has put a lot of chips on the table fighting to find Arizona's law to be unlawful. There's a lot of other states and even local jurisdictions in the nation who are thinking about creating similar laws. And, Republican frontrunner Mitt Romney has taken the position that these laws are good. And so the candidates have polarized.
We talk about immigration law. A lot of people who don't see it or know about it firsthand, are not familiar with what we're talking about here. It's something you practice, litigation in terms of immigration. What are the big issues when you go to court? What do you argue about?
Well, in my cases, I have one foot in the world of entertainment and intellectual property litigation, but my foot in immigration court is pro bono appeals I take with my students, primarily at the UC Irvine School of Law. And we are litigating cases like political asylum, hardship, cases where you have U.S. citizen children who've been here for 10, 15 years since childhood, deportations of them. And the cases all involve decisions coming out of the immigration courts and this immigration system.
And how successful are you in arguing specifically for students who perhaps have been here and don't know any other way of life?
We've been fortunate in the clinic that we've had a good success rate in cases. Now, in a lot of cases where you have U.S. citizen children and the immigration courts have said, no, they have to be deported, de facto deported with their parents in a deportation, the problem you run into is when you go to the U.S. federal courts, the Ninth Circuit, you have laws that Congress has passed starting in the late 90s that limit the ability of the courts to review those cases. So those cases, you mount constitutional arguments, but it's very hard sometimes to get the court's attention. And so the kids ultimately do get deported.
Let's talk a little bit about the change in immigration. There was a report, I believe, from the Hispanic Pew Group that said the number of immigrants crossing the border illegally is actually pretty flat or down in some cases, having to do with different demographics on both sides of the border and the economy here. How is that impacting what you do?
I've seen no impact yet in terms of what we do. The fundamental impact is going to be seen in the future, and that is when we look at immigration reform, which is on the table in this presidential election. The Pew study has found that the major reason for this net zero migration, perhaps even negative migration going back to Mexico, is the economy, as you indicated. And where you realize the underpinnings for migration movements are economic underpinnings, you then adjust federal immigration policy as a result, because you recognize what's going on is people's need for work. And so we may see proposals down the road on the horizon to reinstitute old programs we once had in the 1960s and earlier, where we allowed people to come on temporary work programs.
You, as you mentioned, you're an entertainment litigator as well as someone who does a lot of pro bono work in terms of immigration. And you make this comparison in a book that you've written about the differences of being a celebrity versus someone fighting an immigration issue.
Yeah, they're 2 fundamentally different systems, and we've developed as a society a very good, robust system in our federal courts and our state courts to protect property. And in my celebrity, entertainment, and intellectual property cases, we routinely fight to protect those rights. And you have a really well-developed system of law. But in the immigration system, the same basic procedures and processes that we can count on to protect our property, we don't have to protect people in there.
Why is that?
Well, we are not stakeholders. We being the voters, the politicians, the parents, the teachers, the legislatures. we have a reason to make sure that our property is protected or our criminal interests are protected, because any one of us could be in those court systems. We collectively aren't going to be in immigration court. And so there hasn't been the same development over time of serious protections for these non-citizens. And they don't have lobbying power, obviously, to go to Congress and say, give us the same sets of rights and protections. And so that has formed the basis for my book and for this exploration in this narrative nonfiction format of these two worlds, real cases in each. So you can see how, for example, photographs of Katy Perry get great protection, but a Chinese rice farmer seeking political asylum doesn't get the same kind of protections.
Name of the book?
Show Trials. Comes out May 1st.
Got it. Thank you so much for coming.